Today, we're unpacking a really chilling saga of local folklore, tragic domestic violence, and some truly terrifying karmic justice. We're looking deep into the legend of the Shakchunni in rural Bengal. And honestly, we have to ask ourselves, is this just an old myth, or is it a horrifying reality for people hiding some very dark secrets? Let's get into it.
So what kicks off this whole investigation? It starts with two content creators, Rohan and Ritesh. These guys were pulling late nights, absolutely desperate to find that one massive viral story to make them internet famous overnight. You know the exact type, right? Clout chasers. Well, Ritesh stumbles across this wild claim online about a specific village in West Bengal where absolutely no husband dares to abuse his wife or literally even make her cry. And why? Because of this deadly enforcer known as the Shakchunni. Smelling a guaranteed viral hit, they pack their bags and head out.
Section 1. Bengal's Unsolved Mystery. The Search for the Truth.
Okay, so getting to this village is a literal nightmare. After a brutal 2-day train journey and an actual horse-drawn carriage ride into the middle of nowhere with zero cell service, they roll in at 2 a.m. They immediately start asking around, and the villagers give them all these conflicting rumors. Some say the Shakchunni specifically hunts abusive husbands. Others swear she drinks the blood of men to stay young, or just intensely hates all men. But amidst all that noise, one terrifying detail is exactly the same in every single story. The victims' bodies always wash up in the local lake on Amavasya, which is the night of the new moon.
Section 2. Night at the Dreaded Lake. The Midnight Encounter.
So, totally ignoring the locals' strict warnings to stay away from the water after dark, because of course they do, Rohan and Ritesh walk right into the lion's den. At 1 a.m., they set up their tripod and cameras by the lake. And it's actually described as eerily beautiful, with a half moon and stars reflecting on the dark water. Eventually, the quiet gets to them and they fall asleep. Suddenly, Rohan jolts awake. He feels this freezing cold breeze and hears this mesmerizing voice whispering his name. He feels a hand on his shoulder, but when he looks, no one's there. Following the voice, he actually walks closer to the water's edge.
And that's when she steps out of the shadows, a mesmerizing woman who introduces herself as Madhu, claiming to be a local village girl. She's described as just stunning, wearing a perfectly clean white sari with these striking blue eyes and traditional bangles. Rohan is totally enchanted and genuinely thinks he's perfectly safe. He tells her they're hunting the Shakchunni, and she actually laughs, promising to tell him the real, hidden story behind what the village is so afraid of.
Section 3. Madhumati's Tragic Story. The Origin of the Curse.
So Madhu starts telling Rohan this 20-year-old story about an orphan girl named Madhumati, and it is just tragic from day one. Her mom died at birth, leaving her with a severely neglectful stepmother. Then, purely for a payout, she was married off to this guy named Das, who was basically a monster. He was an alcoholic, insanely jealous of her beauty, and beat her daily. The breaking point? That happened on Karwa Chauth, which is a festival all about marital devotion. A drunken Das falsely accused her of cheating, dragged her by the hair to that very lake, and brutally drowned her while nobody came to help. Driven insane by his own guilt, Das later ended his own life in that same lake on Amavasya.
Now, Das originally tried to cover his tracks. He spread this awful, cruel lie around the village that Madhumati had just run away with a lover. But karma, or something way darker, eventually caught up with him. He started having these intense auditory hallucinations, hearing her screaming and crying over and over. Those echoes of his hidden cruelty are exactly what drove him to the lake to take his own life.
But here is the real kicker. Madhu tells Rohan that the Shakchunni isn't just some mindless monster killing randomly. She is a spirit of vengeance with a very specific purpose, protecting married women from the exact kind of domestic violence that she endured. When she manifests, she's wearing bridal attire, a white sari, a red chunri, and shell bangles. This is super important because it turns the lore into this community-wide deterrent. She's basically an otherworldly guardian handing out a brutal justice that the real world entirely failed to deliver.
So the story wraps up, and then the vibe just completely shifts. Right before vanishing into the dark, Madhu pauses, looks Rohan dead in the eye, and casually asks, "Are you married?" Rohan doesn't miss a beat. He immediately says, No, I'm entirely single." Madhu just replies, "That's good," and disappears.
Section 4. Terrifying Truth Caught on Camera. The Daylight Realization.
Okay, fast forward to the next morning.
Rohan and Ritesh are packing up, feeling pretty great about themselves. They think they've got their viral hit. Rohan is chatting with an older local guy and casually brings up their informant, the beautiful village girl named Madhu. The old man just stops dead. He looks at Rohan and says, "Son, there is no girl named Madhu in our village." I mean, talk about a cold shiver down your spine. Freaked out, the guys sprint back to check the video footage from the camera they left recording on the tripod.
You have got to picture this contrast, because it absolutely shatters everything. What Rohan thought he experienced versus what the camera actually recorded is insane. Rohan perceived this beautiful, clear-eyed girl in a perfect white sari, but the camera lens didn't buy the illusion. The footage showed Rohan having a conversation with a grotesque, terrifying entity. Pitch-black body, dripping wet hair, eyes completely filled with blood, wearing traditional bridal bangles. He wasn't talking to some local girl. He was literally face-to-face with the Shakchunni, Madhumati herself. And just when you think they are thoroughly spooked, the older villager drops the absolute worst piece of lore imaginable. He tells them the Shakchunni only ever reveals herself to people who are married. Remember that little question by the lake? Rohan completely swore he was single. But if the entity appeared to him in the first place, well, it meant he was hiding a massive, deadly lie.
Section 5. Shakchunni's Final Justice. The Unescapable Truth. I mean, you can imagine the sheer panic now, right? They rush to their room to pack, desperate to get out of there. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door slams shut and completely locks itself. They are trapped. Ritesh looks at the calendar on the wall and the blood just drains from his face. It's Amavasya, the night of the new moon, the exact night the entity takes her victims. The room gets freezing cold, the door violently bursts open, and Madhumati is standing there in her true, massive, demonic form. She looks right at Rohan and exposes his secret out loud. "You also divorced your wife, became the reason for her tears, right?" Rohan wasn't single at all. He was an abusive husband himself.
Rohan just entirely breaks down. He drops to his knees, begging for his life, promising to go back, reunite with his wife, and never ever hurt her again. But the Shakchunni just stares down at him with those bleeding eyes, totally unforgiving. She simply says, "There is no forgiveness for sins." Despite his screaming and pleading, she grabs him by the hair and physically drags him out into the night, straight toward the lake. Absolute, relentless justice.
The aftermath is, well, it's brutal. Rohan's screams are silenced forever in the dark water, just like the abusive men before him. But Ritesh, the entity intentionally spares him. He actually survives the night, but now he's carrying this massive burden. In a really twisted way, he gets exactly what he came for, a viral success. He publishes the story, ensuring that Madhumati's tragic history and her lethal warning to abusive men are broadcasted to the entire world.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We're really left with this dark, lingering question from the source material. Is the Shakchunni just a demonic curse, or is she the inescapable consequence of the violence that society tries so hard to keep hidden behind closed doors? It's a wildly fascinating look at how folklore deals with domestic abuse and the ultimate reach of karmic justice. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope this deep dive gave you something to really think about. Catch you next time.